So what if I told you we modern humans are not the most successful human species to ever live? And I'm not saying we won't end up being the most successful. We just haven't been here on Earth long enough. Instead, what if I told you that there was a human species that lived here on our planet for over 2 million years? And we can probably trace our roots back to them. Today, we're going to talk about the extinct Homo erectus, the most successful human species to live thus far. So Homo erectus first started to show up a little over 2 million years ago in what is now South Africa. This evidence comes from a cave system called Drymalin, where we have a specimen of the first ever Homo erectus that we have found called DNH134. The Homo erectus is probably a direct descendant from Homo habilis, who were considered to be the first hominin in the Homo genus and considered to be the first humans. So soon after this population shows up, they quickly start to migrate throughout the whole planet, being the first human species that we have evidence of that left Africa. So outside of South Africa, the first place we see Homo erectus is in East Africa about 1.9 million years ago. And then about 1.8 million years ago, we start to see them in the Caucasus outside of Africa in modern day Georgia. Sorry about my dog. Then after that, about 1.2 to 1.6 million years ago, we see them in Java, what is now Indonesia. Then to about 1 million to 1.5 million years ago, they spread to India and Pakistan, those areas. And then soon after that to China, and then finally into Europe, meaning they were going everywhere. This is a species of humans that was in Africa, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, basically as wide of a range as the Homo sapiens, us, would soon come to have. So with this vast distribution and the length of time that Homo erectus lived, we see some interesting things start to happen. In some circles, they still consider there to be a multitude of subspecies of the Homo erectus, as would be expected with populations that could have been isolated without any admixture for hundreds of thousands of years. And this is still highly debated, and I'm going to do a video on this later, but some of the most commonly recognized subspecies of Homo erectus are the Homo erectus erectus, and then for the early Indonesian fossils, then you had Homo pekinensis, for the Chinese fossils, Homo silensis for the latest surviving Indonesian fossils, you had Homo ergaster for the African fossils, you had Homo georgiacus for the early group of fossils from Georgia, and then Homo tatavilius for the Western European fossils. And with these different subspecies, we see some pretty big differences in their physical makeup that isn't seen in any other human species or any other apes. From fossil evidence, we know that they were a tall species and they were lean, built for endurance, much like us modern humans are today. The average Homo erectus is estimated to stand around 5'9" while females would have been about 5'3". They would have had long legs and pretty narrow hips. In Africa, for example, where the first appeared around 2 million years ago, they probably had dark skin to protect against the intense sun there along the equator, just like modern populations of humans today. Their faces, however, were more rugged, a heavy brow ridge, a low sloping forehead, and a jaw that jutted forward just slightly. As Homo erectus began to spread out of Africa into the cooler climates of Georgia and China and even Java, as expected, they started to look a little different. In Georgia, for example, the earliest migrants had smaller bodies and lighter builds, maybe being better suited for those mountainous regions and mountain terrains. Their faces, though, were still pretty primitive, smaller brains, but already they were showing signs and hints of some regional diversity. In Southeast Asia, for example, the Java populations, often called Homo erectus erectus, as I mentioned, developed thicker skull bones, broader faces, and shorter statures. The tropics didn't require as much heat retention, so they stayed relatively lean. Meanwhile, in northern China, populations like the famous Peking man I'm not going to pronounce this, evolved slightly broader noses and stockier builds, helping them conserve heat during those colder glacial periods that they would have lived through. And Homo erectus was also doing things that you would expect to see much later on in the human species evolution. They were most likely the first species of humans to use fire, but this is still pretty debated. Some of the earliest evidence of this is in the Wonderwerk cave in South Africa, dating to about 1.7 million years ago. They may have even thought like us, there's some evidence, and this is what I find the most interesting, is we have this shell. Here's what that shell is called. Dated to about 500,000 years ago, found in Java, and it's engraved with these geometric patterns, potentially being the evidence of the first art. Or going over to Tanzania, we have evidence that they may have even collected red ochre, which is a huge sign of more advanced human thought, about 1.4 million years old. Most of this evidence shows that they most likely did not have a language, though. They may, though, have used medicinal plants and cared for their elderly and sick, as we found a skull with only one tooth in it, most likely have all fallen out, meaning that they would have cared for someone with only one tooth because they would not have been able to survive on their own. And we also see populations showing up on islands. Did they sail? Were they seafaring? It's kind of hard to tell. We don't really know. But in the end, Homo erectus lived for millions and millions of years, spreading across the world, being the first global human species and one of our oldest ancestors. So by the metrics, they lived for a very long time and were very, very successful. And they didn't go extinct until about 100,000 years ago. So by all those metrics, you could consider them the most successful human species, but we'll have to wait and see what us humans do. Thanks for watching.